And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Rob Gauthier, also known as the E.T. Whisperer. Rob is a world-renowned professional and public channeler. He primarily works with three main guides, Aridif, Treb, and Metatron, but has channeled thousands of ET consciousnesses. Rob is also an in-demand speaker and teacher and has been featured in many documentaries, Gaia TV, internet shows, interviews, and featured in books for his unique channeling abilities. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I really am happy to be here with you today.
Well, we're excited to have you. And first, we all want to know, how did you get this ability to channel these beings in the first place?
Well, it's kind of a long story, and I try not to overdo it. I could probably talk for just an hour about how I came into this. It actually first started off from a place of really bad emotion and really bad mentality, psychology for myself. I was young when I had a kid. I was 19 when I had my son. And when he was born with cerebral palsy, and that's basically brain damage. Right now he's 24. He can't walk. He doesn't talk. He has seizure disorder, cortically blind, can't communicate, so it's an extreme case. He's severely handicapped. And we didn't know until he was almost 2 that that's what was happening with him. We knew he was having seizures. We knew he was developmentally behind all the other kids. He wasn't sitting up when other kids were supposed to be sitting up, and all those marks that the doctors would give you for how your kid should be developing, he was missing all of those. So, by about the time he was 2, we really figured out how severe it was going to be, and they told us the official diagnosis. He's got cerebral palsy. After we looked it up and found out information, internet was still very young at that age. So we did what we could to research it, and it wasn't a pretty diagnosis. And all the things that his mom and I had always thought about, for him in the future was just kind of shattered in that moment. So to give a little reference, if we step back in time, I grew up in a very religious family. I was open to the weird things of the world, UFOs, Bigfoot, things like that. I had a friend, and myself personally had a couple sightings with UFOs and a couple of other experiences. So I was open to all of those things. Now go back, after my son was born, by the time he was about 1.5, 2, we got the news. And about 6 months, 8 months later, I hit a tree with my car one day. I live in Michigan. It snows all the time in the winter. I was coming home and a deer had jumped out in front of my car, and I swerved and hit a tree. It wasn't a horrible accident. It was bad enough to injure my shoulder, cause a lot of pain and a persistent, ache right in my shoulder. I ended up having to go on to pain medication, and after that, I kept taking more and more pain medicine, and then I became addicted to opiates. By the time they were giving me a whole bunch of Vicodins, those didn't work anymore. They stepped it up, and they kept stepping it up until finally the doctors recognized the pattern. I was going in early, making excuses why, I was taking all my medicine. Eventually, they kicked me off. And people who've been through opiate addiction know, once the doctor says you can't have it no more, you'll go to the streets and do it. And then I got involved in other types of drugs in general. This first time of taking opiates after I had hurt my shoulder, I ended up having this sensation where all the emotional pain and suffering I had gone through, all of the mental things that I was putting myself through every day with worrying about how my son's going to make it in life, and what are we going to be able to do for him, with him, all of these things, that became much less hard to deal with when I was high on the pain meds. So the addiction got bad, and it stayed bad for a long time, for about 9 years. I was out of control, drug use in general, with the emphasis mostly on the opiates and, OxyContin and morphine and all sorts of really bad stuff. So that only lasted so long. It can only last so long. For those people who know people with severe addiction issues, it ends in a few different ways. It ends in, prison for some people when they have to break the law to keep their habit going. It ends in death for a lot of people in addiction, or it ends in recovery. For me, seeing that the only tie I kept emotionally in my world for the whole time was the one with my son. I burnt down every relationship um, outside of him through my drug use and through all of that. So when I saw that his care as a human being was getting worse and less because I was so busy going on the streets every day, all day long for drugs, I figured that that's got to stop. So it took me a while, but I got clean. And after getting clean, probably about 4 or 5 months after really getting clean and going through that whole process, I started having emotions that I didn't have since I was a kid. Drugs really cut and sever your tie from your emotional wellness, but in general, just emotions themselves. Um, so after that time, I ended up, just kind of navigating through life. And I really got this feeling of beauty in the world again. Like seeing the sunset. It's beautiful. Like, oh my word, this dog, this animal that used to just be my pet. Now it's something that I love. The relationship with my friend, I can actually love and appreciate this person more. These things I didn't realize that I was missing from that whole time. So that plus a whole lot of other things got me searching for some kind of spiritual outlet. I loved religion when I was a kid, even though I didn't like Christianity. I thought the idea of religion was great because I believed that there was something bigger than us out there, something more intelligent and could design, or maybe even while I was on drugs and a lot of time in my teenage years, I leaned on science a lot to explore creation of the universe, things like that. But I opened myself up to the possibility again, and I found this one spiritualism church, and basically they said, "Hey, we know what happens to you after you die because we can talk to the people after they die."
Hmm.
And I was like, "That's fascinating." So this is either going to be really amazing or really crazy people trying to sell their religion to me. So I'm going to go check it out. And I did. And they gave, still to this day, one of the best readings I ever had. This is before Facebook and before MySpace. And they were able to tell me what was going on with my son. I knew no one at the church. The church was 65, 70 miles away from where I lived. So basically, there was no one who could have figured this out about my son. And yet this person is talking to spirit and telling me this. And then they told me a bunch of stuff about my family that they had no way of knowing. No way.
It's amazing.
And yeah, and when I talked to my dad and shared with him, he told me about the history and verified it that way. So this got me started. And at the church, the guy says, I said, "Man, I really wish I could do what you guys do," because there was a lot of people who could do those readings at the church. And he said, "Everyone can. Just stay after and we'll learn the meditation." So I practiced with them, and that led me to one thing and another and another and another. And eventually I learned the Hemisync Gateway thing from the Monroe Institute. And that's what really helped bring my meditation to a different level. And then after months of doing it on my own and practicing, I met my very first guide, Treb, in an astral projected state. So, like, when people are going to bed and having dreams that are lucid where they feel like they're really there, it was like that, but just doing meditation. I wasn't sleeping. I was just getting into a real deep place and then going to meet this being. And I freaked out and I thought my brain was broken and I thought maybe mental illness or something had set in. Um, and I was scared and I stopped meditating. At this time, I'm doing like 4, 6, 8, 10 hours a day of meditation, and I stopped because it scared me so bad. Eventually, I kept going back and talking to this being, and after about 2 years of seeing this being every day, talking to him, and that's Treb, my original guide. Eventually, I said, "Hey, all the things he told me I would look up online, and I found some things through channelers. And there was like Daryl Anka as a channeler, channels Bashar, and Seth, who is channeled by Jane Roberts. These materials were telling me that some of the things that Treb was telling me was actually true and verified. And I was like, hey, these guys can call these beings through them. Can we do that? And he's like, yeah. So I practiced, and boom, I was able to start channeling Treb after just a few months of trying to learn how to channel. And then I went straight to YouTube in 2010. I uploaded my first video of Treb, and it went out of control. A lot of people resonated with what he was saying. Eventually, I picked it up for a full-time, like an actual job, and I quit doing my other job, which was babysitting, because I was pushed to the point. You can either do this and help people this way, or you can continue working in that job and only being able to help 1 out of every 100 people who ask you for help. So I did. And then after doing that for years, I met Aridif and Metatron, the Nihal Collective, and all the ETs that I've been channeling. So it's been a wild ride. And I know I said I'd keep that short, but I promise you that was the shorter version.
No, that was great. If we get back to the Hemi Sync through the Monroe Institute, did you use like their at-home course?
Yeah, they had a course through the tapes called the Gateway Experience. And when I did it, I was only given access to, I believe it was 1 through 6. They call them waves. And each wave has multiple recordings in it, like 6 recordings at each, I think. So I did all 1 through 6 wave up to the 21 state. Now, this was back, the version I had was a digitalized one, a digitalized copy, but it was a digital copy of the audio cassette tapes, like a CD of the tapes. Mm-hmm. And it was recorded from someone who knew how to turn tapes into CDs. Back then, not everybody knew how to do that. They didn't have special equipment. You could just do that. So these were actually very high quality. And I've heard since then, the Gateway experience has been changed multiple times, like when they went from the black tapes to the white tapes, and white tapes to CD, and then again from the CD to the digital downloads, that there was changes made in those. So I either got the first or second ever version of those, and they were very powerful.
Do you think that the newer versions are better or worse?
From what I understand, they're not as effective now. Now, there's a big history there, and I don't know. I don't personally. This was a guy who's an audio engineer who had all the different versions of them and compared them to the audio editing software and saw markedly, drastically different audio from one to the other. I've had some people who went and bought the course online because they heard my story 10 years ago, and they said, hey, I'm going to check it out. And then they're like, didn't do much. And I've had other people buy the same thing and say it did really well. And then I've heard other people who found old, downloaded, recorded versions online and found them through like torrent sites or something, and were the old ones. And I've had some of them say it was amazing and some of them say not so great. So I think it's different for everybody, but I do think the majority of the feedback I've gotten, the older ones do tend to work better.
Do you think,
from what I could see,
do you feel that that's the most important thing that gave you the ability to do this?
If you would have asked me then, I would have said yes. If you ask me now, no, not at all. That's a tool that helped me open up that energy, but my connection to Treb was something that was very likely going to happen one way or another in this life. And I don't mean fate, because I don't believe in fate. But I do believe that as a soul in living in a human body, that we are designated before we have an incarnation, that we're going to do something along the lines of a theme. And if we can't fit into one part of our theme, we'll find another part. So I think me and Treb were kind of inevitable in this life. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but I feel that more strongly than I feel, hey, it was an accident that just randomly happened. And wow, now I can speak to ETs in my own mind, right? You know, there's obviously other explanations. I could have a brain tumor, I could be crazy, and I've seriously considered those things as a possibility. But more likely, from my personal experience, I would say that I was meant to do this in this lifetime, even if not for other people, for myself, because that's what I needed for the huge drastic changes in my life that happened, that only could have happened that way. Because as much as I changed from the time I got off drugs to the time I got clean, that change was very small in comparison from the change I have when I first started my spiritual journey to where I was after I met Treb.
Do you think that Treb was the one visiting you long before all this, when you had those UFO sightings?
He wasn't the one when I saw the UFOs. Me and him have talked about that, but he was present several months before I met him. Like when I was meditating, I was feeling this huge presence. And after we met, you know, he's not limited to time like we are. So he can go back and look at my childhood, and he can go back and look at me being born, and can go back between our lifetimes, between the last time I was born to this life. So he's a lot less limited, being in a higher dimension and being further along in the consciousness in his evolution. But he definitely was there for at least 6, 8, 9 months before I met him, for sure.
You said that you met him astral traveling. When you define astral traveling, would that be something like a lucid dream type of astral travel, or are you like having a full out of body experience where you could look down and see your body?
Yeah, it's like it's more defined like being out of my body, but it's not me lifting out of my body and then going to meet Treb. It
Mhm.
happens very quick for me. So to me, it feels like a dream. Like I'm meditating and then I'm gone, right? There's no transition for me
Mhm.
when I'm doing it. But that's how he describes my experience when I'm visiting him. He's like, hey, you're having an astral projected state. Now I can do that without seeing Treb or visiting Treb, but it's very rare compared to how I've done. It's something I've never been able to control. It's something I personally can't. You know, like some people have said, wow, you should go do this and do that. And I'm like, I wish I could just go do this or go do that, but I don't have control over it. It's a lot like a dream state for most people. When they start having dreams, they have no clue what they're going to dream and don't plan to have a certain dream. They just have the dream. So it feels a lot like a dream state. But the way that Treb describes it to me is that it's an astral projected state.
I was checking out your Instagram, and it looked like when you had a post with Treb talking, I think, it showed a reptilian looking being. Is that what he looks like?
That's exactly what he looks like. He looks like a gigantic, 7 foot plus being who looks like a reptilian, purple eyes, green skin, little, like a green blue skin with little red dots. That's why I thought I broke my brain. That's why I didn't go back into channeling or in the meditation for a few days after I met him, because he is a very scary looking being, a very imposing. Plus, you know, humans are naturally afraid of reptilian beings anyway.
Right.
I mean, humans squeal when they see snakes and alligators, but imagine seeing a bipedal, 7.5 foot being looking down at you with a head the size of a bowling ball and teeth as sharp as razors. I mean, that scared the heck out of me. So
Wow. Well, how did you muster up the courage to go back?
at this point, I was searching for truth, and at that point, I needed to know if I was crazy, if it was just a one-time off experience, if the drug use had permanently damaged me in some way, if I was mentally ill, because I did, my family has a history of psychic ability, right? But most people who don't make themselves aware of their psychic ability, and most people who don't learn how to use their gifts, it can seem like mental illness, right? So we have a history in the family of mental illness. Um, and that was a big concern, holy crap, am I going crazy like my family members had done? So yeah, I needed to know. And when I did, I was pretty pleasantly surprised to feel. Now, I do want to back up. There's something I left out of my initial meeting with Treb that also helped me make this decision. It wasn't just what he said or what energy was there, but when I freaked out in that astral state, I felt like someone who doesn't know what a heart attack feels like trying to describe a heart attack, right? I just froze, fear, couldn't breathe, and it was instantly just the worst feeling.
Hmm.
Like if you've ever been in a car accident, you see the accident going to happen, that moment of dread right then, it was like that, but a lot worse. And then for no reason, with no explanation, I instantly feel this huge love. And that was my first meeting with them. And after I felt that love and was like held myself back a little and was able to actually let go of that fear instantly and focus in on Treb, then Treb says something to the effect of, hey, we're connected. The way you're seeing reality isn't really the way it works. If you want to connect with me, learn more, you can. Something simple. It was very simple, very short. After that, I was not going to not go back. That feeling of love made me feel a little okay, but I also was like, what if this being can control my emotions, right? I had a million questions, but I wasn't going to get answers if I didn't go back. So I needed answers, and that helped draw me to that experience again. And then the next day, and then the next day, and then 2 years later, I was able to channel him. So we became good friends. Like the things he shared with me were helping my life drastically.
Hmm.
Everything he shared with me helped me change the way I saw something or the way I felt about something. It was incredible.
That's great because it appears that most people, when they talk about reptilians, seem to mention that they're usually malevolent. So maybe you can give us a little reptilian 101 here.
Yeah, I can. First of all, there are malevolent reptilians. And in our galaxy, from everything I've learned from Treb and Aridif, more reptilians are malevolent or at least not loving than there are positive or loving or good ones. And the percentage is quite tilted. They say that over 80% of all reptilians are type 2 beings, which means like humans are type 2. We have the possibility of being really loving, and we also have the possibility of being really unloving and malevolent. And we have the whole spectrum in between. Well, that's what type 2 is. You can have type 2 beings that are very benevolent, but they don't really see that their selves as part of everything or oneness. And that's enough for them not to be a type 1. And a type 1 sees themselves as oneness, sees themselves as a part of everything. So, they wouldn't hurt something else because that's hurting yourself. And you wouldn't infringe on the free will of another because you're infringing on the free will of yourself. Treb's race and Aridif's race are both type 1 races. Most of the reptilians that humans deal with, which are either like Alpha Draconian or Earth reptilians, are considered type 2. And with the Alpha Draconians, they're considered malevolent, and the Earth reptilians are a lot like humans. They have a spectrum which has very benevolent and then very malevolent. Most of them just don't like humans because they can't trust humans. So that's why they don't really work around humans or with humans. But they're in a higher dimension too. And that's why you don't just see a reptilian being walking through your living room every day. So yeah, we've got trauma with reptilians, the very first race that ever came to Earth and intervened with humans was the race that most humans call Anunnaki. And these beings had genetic components of Alpha Draconians and Pleiadian beings, the feminine humanoid Pleiadians. So they looked like humans, but they still had a lot of reptilian DNA. So just even that part of us, we have reptilian DNA within humans. So there's a reason why humans are naturally fearful of them. I think that was put there by the Anunnaki to make humans more compliant. And that's why we have that God complex. Like we need to praise something or see something as bigger and better than all of us. The hero worship, the praising part, I think that comes from the Anunnaki's design. And it also, you know, connects to all the things that we've had in history, at least from the way my guides describe it, that have happened. You know, we've had trauma with reptilian races. So, you know, there are really loving and type 1 races. I think the type 1 is very small for reptilians. It's less than 10%. And the rest are type 2 but benevolent. And then the other 80+% is type 2, ranging from neutral to really malevolent. So I think it's all of that which compiles and then kind of creates the space for reptilians to be the bad guys. Plus humans do this too. We have to blame other beings for our stuff, right? We have to blame the devil for making us do bad things. We have to blame, you know, the rich for being poor. We have to blame just everything, you know, reptilians for us not being able to do something. There's a part of us that wants to do that as humans. It's part of our evolutionary specialty, I think.
Can you break that down for me a little bit again? And what I'm speaking of is the type 1 versus type 2 type of being.
Sure. So I brushed over it, and I'll get real specific because there is a big difference with these types of beings. The type 1 being is considered part of everything. That's how they see themselves. That's how they will act. A type 1 being can be in any dimension or any density of evolution, but they're always going to behave like they're part of one piece of all that is, right? You've heard people say we're at one with each other, you know, near-death experience. People say, I felt oneness. I felt like I was a part of everything. Well, that's because we are. And these beings don't just see that, they live that. So they're experiencing very deep ties to everything they come in contact with. And those are type 1 beings. Type 1 beings will never interfere with your free will. They'll never tell you what to do. They'll observe your free will. And they always get their inspiration from higher dimensions or higher sources of information, and then redistribute it down because they're part of that puzzle, right? I get and I give, I give and I get. Type 2s are a lot of different ways. Type 2s is a spectrum, like human beings. Type 2 doesn't fully see itself as part of all it is, or doesn't see itself as oneness with everything else. And that can be as little of a difference between really, really benevolent type 2 race that loves everything and tries to help everyone and doesn't want to interfere with your free will. There can be that in a type 2, but they also don't see that oneness fully. So maybe like a very benevolent ETs that have helped humans before, they'll look at humans and say, oh, you guys are messing around with nuclear weapons. That's not safe for you. That's not good for you. That's not going to end well for you. So we think it's best to disarm your nuclear weapons when you're trying to test it, right? That's a good thing. We can all agree that's a good thing. But they're interfering with the soul experience behind a human. So that would consider them not behaving as part of oneness. Now, this is something that some people don't like about type 1s. A type 1 being can stand there and watch us mess with nuclear weapons all day. And their philosophy, because all these things are one, and because all of us are one, if you blow yourself up as a planet, if you're killing each other, your soul wanted that journey. You chose to come into a body and incarnate as a human. You're going to do what you need to do. At the end, we're all one. At the end, after our bodies are gone, we're still one consciousness. So they have a very specific belief behind that. And the benevolent type 2 races are the ones that really have helped humans along a lot more than type 1s or type 2s. Now, the caveat with type twos is that even if they're really benevolent, they might not be considered that way by another race. Let's say, a malevolent race looks at human beings and says, oh, I don't like these guys. I want to kill them all. We have technology that could wipe off their life on a planet. The other race will say, no, no, no. We love humans. We want them to exist. So they might step in and say, no, we're not going to let you do that to humans. That's great, right? As a human, that's awesome. But again, they're not taking our free will into consideration. Our free will says, hey, as a soul, as the way you can see the soul working with each other, we attracted some form of death on a large scale by having these beings. Or maybe we're going to attract not having that because we're attracting good ETs to come and help us. And the type 1 sees that very black and white, like, hey, I'm not getting involved. And the type 2s, but the type 2 opposite spectrum from the benevolent ones that are really willing to help us, they're the ones who just hate everything. If you're not a part of their race, you're garbage to them. They don't care. They'll take what they want. They'll do what they want. They don't have to ask for permission. And they don't see us as part of one. There's definitely a hierarchy. I'm better than you. I'm stronger than you. I'll take what I want. And that's the same thing that a lot of people think and feel about reptilians, because the strongest and most evolved reptilians are a lot like that. They're really, really more. They take what they want.
So are you saying that the Anunnaki were the first beings here, or were there another group of beings that even predate them?
So the Anunnaki were the first ones to manipulate human DNA. There were a lot of races here before humans were on Earth. The very first race was called the Conki, and they were like an aquatic being species, and this was back before Earth had super oxygenated atmosphere. And they were driven out of Earth because of that oxygen change. So basically, there was a lot of simple life in the ocean, and it evolved and eventually became one of the very few evolved races on Earth. And they evolved into a place that my guides would call third density, which is basically a soul evolution place where you become bipedal, where you become aware of yourself, where you become aware of time, and you experience time in a linear way. So they marked that very first third density evolution on Earth. They ended up leaving Earth because they had to, otherwise they would have died. They had to get the help of other races, races that used to live on Mars. Mars and Venus both had life like humans do here now on their planets before. And during that time, the beings from Mars came and helped them to go off planet. After they were gone, the next evolution was something that's called, I think, Lumanians. And that's not Lumerians, the Atlanteans and Lumerians. It was Lumanians. And these beings were beings that actually Jane Roberts talked about. And when I heard that, I asked Treb about those beings, and he confirmed that what she said. And they were a very humanoid type of race, but a very skinny, thin, non-violent race that ended up dying because of their refusal to accept violence. And Earth is a place where, as souls, when we come to Earth, we know we're going to have to go through a tough time. That's part of what the Earth collective consciousness or energy is about. So we know, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to have duality, we're going to be playing with animals, environments, natural phenomenon that's going to be hard and kick our butt all the time. And they couldn't handle it. So they died out before they ever made it to the next step of evolution. Then the next one was so that's 1, 2. The third one being, I know I'm missing one, but yeah, there were more races. Then we had the Atlanteans, Lumerians, and then after they left and kind of died out, the early humans were there, and Earth reptilians were between the dinosaur age and the Atlantean age. So they were like the third incarnation cycle. So we have cycles on Earth where different races come and evolve, at least so far. And so we're not by any means close to the first race of beings that have been here, but we are the predominant race now as far as size goes and part of our evolution. And once we get to the place where we can go out on spaceships and evolve our consciousness and our technology, and we can leave and start going to the stars, then these animals that are here now, if they survive, if nothing happens to Earth, they'll go on to their bipedal experience. So cats, dogs, dolphins, whales, these beings will be the next ones to kind of have the incarnation cycle of Earth. Maybe all of them will do it. But if you watch the evolution of Earth for the last 30 years, you'll notice that animals are doing things that they've never done before, getting up on two legs, using complex reasoning. That's because all of us are evolving. It's not just a human thing, it's an Earth thing. So even the very elemental types of energy is evolving. So yeah, it's like cycles, and once we're gone and done, another being will come in. And then once Earth as a consciousness is done having reincarnations and having the life of Earth, then it's time for Earth to be done. Maybe an asteroid will hit it, maybe it'll get eaten up by the sun. And that's horrible on a perspective of living life here. But as a soul, we've lived in so many different star systems and so many different races. We've been reptilians and insectoids and humanoids and avian beings and all the types of beings that can and do exist out there. As a soul, we've done all of that. So as a human, it's a very profound thing because we're living here on Earth and getting to see that linear time snapshot of it. And it's fascinating to see all the races just on Earth and all the races that have the possibility of linear future being the next, the next higher dimensional being. Where do we go from here? There's a race of beings I actually have channeled before called the Beta Leporis, and they're called the Nihal. And they're a future version of human from one probability and one timeline. So these are pretty complex things with the human mind. But if we play with that a little bit and say, wow, what will happen when we evolve? What happens when we do get off Earth? Imagine all the different possibilities that we have as a human race, going to one star at a time with a few thousand people when we get the technology to do that. We'll be a part of the galaxy for real. Not just what we've had visited with us or the beings that we communicate with through like the way I'm doing it or the way a lot of people are learning to do it. We're going to have full on, occupancy in the bigger galaxy. It'd be amazing.
Since the animals are changing, and I don't know how much we're changing, but do you think the Earth is in some sort of big shift right now? If not now, is it coming soon?
Yeah, I do. The way my guides described it, they like the first year I ever channeled Treb publicly, he started talking about 2012 being, I was like, why is 2012 a big deal? I started channeling in 2010. Why does everybody think we're either going to die or we're going to go to this next level? And he's like, well, 2012 is a little marker. It's like the precipice on a cycle. He said it's a 9-year cycle before 2012, a 9-year cycle after. So 2012 was like the middle of that cycle. And this cycle was to evolve as human beings from one dimensional level, one advancement level, like a stepping stone in our place of evolution to the next. And it's not something where 18 years from this date, you're going to be doing this. It's during the next 18 years, you have the opportunity to accelerate drastically the way that you're going to start evolving. And it's your choice as a race, as a human race, it's our choice. And as individuals, it's our choice of which way to evolve. And I know in the metaphysical community and in the channeling community, a lot of people hear the words ascension, things like that. Well, Ascension is something a lot of people, I think, misunderstand. They're like, hey, at the end of this 18 years, I should be able to jump out a window, start flying. I should be able to have telepathy, jump in a spaceship. Souls don't evolve that quick. I wish they did. That would be fun for at least a couple of lifetimes, but it's a gradual thing. And what I noticed is 9 years before 2012 was 2003, and the end of it was 2021. And what happened at the end of 2021? Everything changed. The world we know was flipped upside down, and it's like it's time to rebuild. How do we want to start the new chapter in our life? So, not just because Treb and Aridif told me that that's a cycle and that's a part of change, but everything I've learned from them and from myself and experience and talking to other people, I've seen a shift in people. And the shift, Ascension, the way people see it, it's like, oh man, everyone's going to get more spiritual and start believing the same things, and kumbaya, and we'll all be able to get together. That's a nice idea, and I think that eventually humans will get to that. But Ascension really means what you're doing as a soul and how you're going to grow from that. So, what all did we see? We saw a lot of deaths happening between 2016 and 2021. And even now, a lot of deaths. Those souls were saying, yes, I get that there's an evolution happening now. I get that there's an acceleration in human understanding, not a spiritual sense, but humans understand themselves better. How many people did you know before 2021 that just stayed quiet and didn't say anything? And then in 2019, 2020, 2021, they're on their social media yelling and screaming for a cause that was important to them. Whether you agree with them or not, they were doing something more. They were involved in the world, not just their world, right? The big world. They were out doing things and talking about things and getting excited about things. So I see it. I see people evolving. Whether they're evolving towards the same beliefs that I do or not, doesn't matter to me. I know a lot of people, when they cover this idea with their own self, that matters to them. They're like, well, I found more people going to the spiritual community. To me, that doesn't mean anything. The people's growth as a person and an individual, and how much they want to be a part of the earth and have earth be a part of them. I've seen so much more of that in the last few years than I've ever seen.
Has Treb ever told you whether or not there are ETs walking around on the earth among us right now, and we're just not able to recognize them?
Yeah. He has said before that there are some beings. Most of them don't live here. Some of them do. Some of them are working, like with humans. You hear about ETs that crash land here and that stay with government. I think some of those are true. I don't think a lot of them are. I think a lot of them are used to kind of distract people away from the actual things. But yeah, I think some of them are real. I think from what Treb and Aridif have shared with me, there are people, like human people who work with ETs in a physical sense. Mostly they're people who have power, money, and they're using their connection and communication with the ETs to kind of hold a power of sort. I think it's very rare. I think only a few people in the world have that kind of power and ability. But I think a lot of ETs are coming to Earth now, not for vacation, but just to see what humans are like. I think a lot of ETs are planning to start working with humans as a collective and whole. There's a lot of hybridization programs that happen with ETs. There's a lot of physical visitations where they're taking people and studying. Some people call it abduction, some people call it contact. But I would like to think that most of those aren't done just to mess with people or to understand people. I think most races of beings that work with humans have been working with them for over 100 years. So they already know everything they need about our physical bodies that they could, right? If they're far enough advanced to fly. learn how to bend space-time to visit us. Yeah, they already know us. So I think the abductions aren't really abductions. I think that they're meeting humans on a level that they can, whether it's for genetic programs and hybridization, or whether it's for contact in a subconscious level to help that human with whatever, or intervene. You know, you've heard, I don't know if you have personally, but I know our community has heard about people being abducted who had physical things wrong with their body, and then they get abducted and they feel better and they go back to the doctors, you know, 3 months later, and nothing's wrong anymore, and this thing was supposed to kill them or whatever. I think that's really rare too, but I think it does happen. And there are beings who are here for, you know, not so happy or great purposes, like working with those humans at a physical level. But I don't think it's as much as some people think. I think some people think every person who is a politician is a reptilian, and everyone who is in the government is a reptilian. Those Earth reptilians do live here, but they're not even in our dimension, so that we can't see them unless you're psychic enough to see them with your third eye open and be able to communicate or connect with them that way. Or if they drop their own vibrational energy down enough for you to see them. You know, a lot of beings who first ever communicated with humans in early times created little avatars of bodies for their consciousness to break apart in, so that they can operate here in that dimension and interact in that dimension without being in that dimension, you know, not fully being in that dimension. So it's a lot of nuances to it, but no, we're definitely not alone here. And yeah, there have been ETs physically on Earth, probably for a long time, over 100 years, I would imagine.
Is Aridif also a reptilian?
He is not. Aridif is an ancient Pleiadian being. Um, I know you saw my website and probably a few of the videos. If you saw the very light pale blue skinned person with long purple straight hair, most people think it's a female.
Yeah,
That's
I did
Aridif.
too.
Yep, that's Aridif. He is feminine from our perspective, but for his own race, he's considered a masculine being. Um, so that's Aridif, and he comes from the star system called Deneb, but they call him Ancient Pleiadian because his race evolved in the Pleiades, and then they moved out of the Pleiades because the Pleiades, people think, you know, the Pleiadian means a star in the Pleiades, but the Pleiades is actually a star system, like a star factory, a nebula that's creating thousands of stars, and there are tens of thousands of races that live in that tiny little patch in the sky we call Pleiades. Aridif's race was one of those, and they moved all the way out to Deneb to be able to kind of spread their wings and get into a place where they could incarnate and have their own energy, you know. And it worked out well because they're a highly advanced race and they're considered sixth density. So their evolution, they're at the last stop a soul goes before it goes back into oneness completely. And that's also, you know, why it's a type 1 being.
Another topic that I see you talk about quite a bit on your social media is the Orion Wars.
Yeah, no, I've done some videos on it. I've done some channeling on it. I don't know a ton about it. I do know that there was involvement from a race of beings that still exist now, the Alpha Draconian beings. That's the reptilians. That's the one that humans kind of see as a bad guy. I know they were involved. I do know that a lot of Pleiadian races and Syrian races were involved. Again, those are blanket terms because there's lots of races in the Pleiades, and there's several, you know, like 5 or 6, maybe 7 different races in Sirius. Arcturian has multiple planets, multiple, like 7 races, I think, from Arcturus. So, you know, we're going back a long time. Now, this is before humans were around, way before humans were around. I don't know what specific time frame it was. I know it was a war that lasted a long time, but this was a galactic scale war. This war wasn't just like World War II or World War I, where it was very shocking because it was our whole planet. this was the whole galaxy. Like planets of beings died. Treb's race was around when that happened, and they were actually targeted, and a lot of their race was killed. Like a third of their population died. They were really young though. They were at that time when the wars happened. They were at the evolution that humans are at right now, like a third to fourth density beginning part. So they lost people. Aridif, his race wasn't involved directly, but they were around. Treb's race is less evolved than his. So this was a galactic scale war, and basically there were a lot of factions. The Alpha Draconians were one. They have a lot of hybridized reptilian beings. Um, like Earth reptilians are children of the Alpha Draconian beings. The Alpha Draconian beings kind of solved the lack of reptilian archetypes in our galaxy and went to seed it. And that's where a lot of races had problems with them. They're like, why are you spreading your gene around our galaxy? And why are you doing this? And why are you coming to planets where only animals exist in our solar system and making, basically hybrids of you? That wasn't well received. So that was a part of it. I know that humanoids that were considered positive were a part of it. I know that artificial intelligence was a big part of it. I know insectoids were a really big part of it. And I know that the reptilians, most of them were basically on the bad guy side, the side from our perspective, that would be a bad guy side. I know insectoids, most of them were in the bad guy side. I know a lot of humanoids, like one of the Syrian races was a very bad, malevolent race that murdered, hundreds of planets worth of beings. So this was something that happened and happened, for thousands of years. This war went on. I still don't know everything about it. I've talked to my guides about it several times. They've talked about it several times. I don't know how it concluded. I know partially of why it started. And that had to do with the Alpha Draconian reptilian beings breaking contract. Someone broke a contract with them. There was an agreement made. They broke the contract, and the Draconians did not like that, so they kind of annihilated that race, and that started a lot of defensiveness and anger from the beings who were associated with that. So imagine on a scale in the galaxy how it is around the world. We have all these different cultures and all of these different pockets of population. And when one thing happens to one of them, the others can easily get involved. So imagine that on a galactic scale. Yeah, it was pretty bad. But I wish I knew more about it. My guide, Aridif, is probably the most insightful being I met. He's the one who finds history. He knows how to connect to the archives, that exist about these things and really get the information. And him and I have been supposed to work on a book about what happened with the Galaxy Wars and the Orion Wars. But right as we started with it in 2015, my father passed away, and that derailed a lot of things in our life and our trajectory. But actually, this next year, I'm going to start back with them. So I'll finally be able to learn as much about the Orion Wars as everyone else seems to know. Because a lot of people tell me something. I'm like, what, really? I had no clue. I've only heard of the Orion Wars a couple times before I channeled the first part of it. But since then, I think some channelers have really gotten into it and talked about it. But I don't listen to many other channelers. As a channeler myself, I just kind of listen to what my guides tell me and let that kind of resonate through me. It's either I'm gonna resonate with it or not. But if I hear 1,000 different opinions, then I've got to go through all of them. Honestly, in life right now, with between kids and channeling, I don't have enough time to listen to other channelers too much. So yeah, that's kind of what I know about it, which isn't a lot.
Do you ever get the feeling that people confuse you with the beings that you channel? Like they expect you to know everything that these beings know? You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, the last time I was in Sedona, someone called me Treb. another person. They're like, "Hey, Aridif," and I'm like, and you know, I've got a friend. I think he was on your show before, Daryl Anka.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So he gets called Bashar all the time. We had him at one of our events in 2017, and like 50 people said, "Hey, there's Bashar over there." I was like, "That's Daryl Anka. He channels Bashar." You know, and I don't take it personally. To me, I see Treb and Aridif as kind of a part of me anyway, because the way they describe that our souls work together, it's like, when I die and I come back and die and come back, 20, 50 times later, I'm going to have the chance to be Treb. Or maybe 50 times after that, when I die and born and die and born, I'll have a chance to be Aridif. So in a way, we kind of are connected like that. But I don't blame people, that when they tune in for my channeling, they're tuning in to listen to Trevor Aridif. And I've got that face that brings that energy. It was disturbing for me the first time I actually channeled in trance. It made me ill, like my stomach was gurgling, like that feeling you have right before you get sick. I felt that way because I could not watch myself on a video doing and saying things that I could not remember doing or saying. That really freaked me out. It took me a long time. Still this day, it's hard for me to watch my own channeling, not for that reason alone, but it's weird. You don't have a conscious memory of doing something, and there you are doing it.
Has Ardif or Treb or any other being ever told you why and how were the pyramids built?
Yeah, no, they shared a little bit about this. Treb did, especially when I first started. These were things that were done by the Anunnaki with human help. You know what I mean? With their technology, with their zero gravity movement. The Giza ones were, but there were pyramids built before then that were done by the Atlanteans, who were here before the very first version of humans. And I know a lot of people see the timelines kind of blur in there. They say humans were alive when Atlanteans were alive. Well, that's true too, but those were the Atlantean survivors. And that was way after the great fall of Atlantis, like the whole planet's worth of Atlantean beings. They just have slowed down and eventually kind of died off because of everything there. But yeah, so some of the more ancient ones that are around the world, are probably either Atlantean or were made with early humans with the help of Anunnaki. And basically, they were there for a couple of reasons, for stations, but also like some kind of energy connection. Like, all right, so imagine the grid. Are you aware of the term like ley lines, dragon
Mm-hmm.
lines?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these lines don't just carry electromagnetic energy, they carry consciousness. So when you're thinking a thought and you're trying to like talk to someone through telepathy, you're sending a thought out and it goes into that electromagnetic grid and then goes over to that person. And of course, there's a lot of ways that it goes to get there. But it's almost instantly. Like consciousness is over tenfold the speed of light. It's instant. You can go galaxy to galaxy in a matter of seconds with thought because it has that property. So when these pyramids were being built, those were reinforcing some of the energetic ley lines. They were having problems with the physical body staying alive on Earth. Now, when you have a consciousness like ETs, they can't really live here long term unless they really do some adapting to themselves. And I'll try to explain this in a way that makes sense, but it's kind of hard, okay? Um, a planet is a consciousness, right? The beings that live on that planet are consciousnesses that were created from that planet. And that's why they have symmetry. That's why humans can live on Earth. But if an ET comes here, he's going to have a harder time, not just because he's not used to the environment, wasn't directly evolved in a place with oxygen and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, physically, that's the reason, right? But energetically, he's not in tune with the Earth. The vibration of his body and the organs and the signals that are being sent from the earth to the heart and from the heart to the brain, those come from the electromagnetic fields, the ley lines of Earth. So without that, you're not adapting. Now, the Nihal, the Beta Leporis, they were a version of humans who left Earth and landed on the star system called Beta Leporis. And when they landed there, it created a whole new race. Not just because humans move somewhere, but now they have a different planet. So now that planet's consciousness is hosting a new consciousness, and it changed their DNA. Like after several generations, their DNA shifted drastically. So now they're not just humans like we are. They're very short and very brown-skinned beings with yellow hair and like I think they had golden eyes. So they don't even look like humans, and that's because their DNA had to be tuned with that. So the Anunnaki, when they lived here, they had to create these pyramids to enhance the electromagnetic fields and the grid systems so that their bodies could stay, these little avatar bodies they created with their consciousness could stay alive and can more easily harmonize with Earth's consciousness. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I was described why those were there.
Well, do you think that humans could really be a space-based race or a space-faring race? Because once we leave, how will our consciousness react with not being with the Earth consciousness?
Yeah, I think it'll be harder for us to do that. We're going to have a lot better technology, place that can get us, and we're going to have to learn how to shift our consciousness in. Usually beings never leave their planet until they become fourth density beings, and that's one of the big reasons for it. In third density, we're very much tied to the Earth. The third density is representing the third chakra, right? Your solar plexus area. So that's very much your personality, your whole sense of self is tied to that area. And with humans being in third density, they're very much tied to the Earth. When they get into their heart chakra, that's the fourth density. That's the density about connections. Now you can evolve enough to have technology grow as a part of yourself. And when you start integrating consciousness into technology, that's when you become a galactic race instead of a planetary race like we are now, like we're trying to transition out of. But when you're in your heart, you're more centered, right? Because it's not just Earth that has a grid system. The solar system has a grid system. Each planet around them has a grid system. So let's say we move to Mars. We would do okay at Mars. Yeah, we would change as a race. Our DNA would shift a little bit, but we're also getting energy from that solar grid like we were back on Earth. And when you move to a different solar system, you're going to get. But when you're situated in the center of your consciousness instead of grounded down more towards the lower, it makes the soul lighter. It makes the consciousness and the physical dimensionality lighter. So now instead of being in a third density or fourth dimensional height, width, depth, and dimension, now you're a fifth dimensional being, height, width, depth, time, and fluid time. So now you're less dimensional. So it's not as hard on that body because your body is not as solid. So that's why usually only fourth density beings, fifth density, and sixth density beings can travel. And when you get to that last dimension, that sixth density, seventh, eighth dimensional being, then you're able to transport your consciousness instead of building a spaceship to drive. You can just teleport with your thought. You're so locked into the whole human race, then yeah, we'll be able to get out there and do that, I'm sure.
If someone wants to learn to channel themselves, do you have any recommendations on how to do that?
Yeah, a lot of recommendations. The first thing I would tell them is go to my YouTube channel. There's a playlist. I teach 2 channeling classes for free there, and I do that because I think everyone should channel. I want everyone to learn how to channel because I think that's where humans are going to evolve. We're going to be a telepathic channeling society, and that's a good place to start. But once you get into that, practice, learn to meditate, learn how to relax your body, and learn to breathe. If you can do those things, you can do the types of channeling. And another thing, there's not just Rob's way to channel, right? There are tons of people who teach channeling, some people who've done books. Do as many of those as you can until you find someone that feels right for you, and connect to their material, connect to their channeling, connect to their channeling classes, and find out why they resonate with you. But once you start learning how to channel and you start practicing channel, my best advice is something that I learned from just doing sessions with people. When I first started channeling, I offered people, hey, do you want to ask some questions? Because I already know the questions that I would think, but I want to see what other people types of questions you can come up with. And then my channeling got way better. The more you do it, and the more you do it with other people, so that a third party consciousness can get involved with you and your guide, or you and the being who you're channeling. Now we have three. Now there's a way to really get it moving. So practice it with other people, practice it by yourself, have people ask questions. Those are really good, but all channeling is really bringing in something through you. And we do that all the time. People think of channeling as this really complex thing that I have to do in order to speak to ETs or angels or whatever. But we channel all the time. Music makers who are just jamming on their guitar, they lose all reference of time. They're just in the moment, really jamming. That's channeling. You know, doing, if you're a sailor or a writer or a cook, whatever it is, if you're doing something you love and you lose yourself in it, that's the basic light form of channeling. And if you can do that, you can teach yourself how to channel more complex, like my wife calls it, fancy channeling. She's a channeler too. So when she was learning, trying to get into the trance state, she calls it fancy channeling. So I still always love that term, fancy channeling.
Is there any one thing that you learned while channeling, a piece of information that just blew you away, and you still keep thinking about it today?
The very first time that I went back to Treb, he described something to me that I still have a hard time with. And he said, you know, the first time he's like, hey, reality is not what you think it is, blah, blah, blah. But then he says something to the effect of, you know, you're creating a lot of the physical reality with yourself through a matrix, you know, like a projection. Your soul is putting that consciousness through the projector to project physical reality. Now, to me, that's a belief. I already feel that, know that. I believe it 100%. I don't tell people they should believe it, but for me, it's a fact. But it's still hard to see how that plays out every day. You know, there are people who get really literal about it, and people who are figurative, that you create your own reality. But I think both of them are true. That's the biggest thing. That's the thing I still have to try to study all the time. I'm like, okay, I did something I didn't like. I had an experience I didn't feel good about. What part did I play in that? And could I have changed it? Could I have fixed it? Or was it something that was important? And 6 months goes by and I'm like, oh, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have met this person, wouldn't have had that happen, blah, 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 blah. So from a distance, I can see it playing out behind me. But that was probably the biggest one. But there are things I learn all the time. I've had people, when I come back from channeling, they're telling me what was said in this thing. And sometimes I hear some strange stuff and I'm like, are they misunderstanding the channeling? What, you know, there's no way that that was said. And then I go back and listen to it, and that's exactly what was said. Things that are just crazy, you know, like my soul came here to work with, you know, talking to animals, and I was a queen of a whole planet or something. And I'm always like, are you sure about that? You know, and then they're like, yep, Treb and Aridif said it 100%. I'm like, I don't think Trevor would ever say anything like that. And I go back and listen, and the context is a little different than how they might have described it, but for intents and purposes, yeah, it was what they said. So channeling never stops surprising me ever. There's always something new or something funny.
Have you ever asked them about your son's illness and what can be done or can't be done.
Absolutely. That was line number one. That was the first thing. I'm like, all right, so you're telling me that, oh, our souls are doing a lot of this, and that we're, because that was the very, very fundamental breakdown that I had, was going through under. I was like, okay, so I'm creating my reality, right? I met you. That's great. What about my son? He was. Why would he have done that? There's no way he would purposefully have done that. He was harmed by the lack of care of another human being. They messed up, gave him brain damage. No, who would choose that? So Treb tells me, your son was a warrior in so many of his last lives, in like last 5, 6, 7 lives. He was a warrior. He used his body. He used his mind. Before that, he was a genius. He used his mind. Before that, just all these different lifetimes that he spent as a human doing nothing but doing what he was told, using his body or using his mind. He never got to experience emotions in those last 10, 15 lifetimes. He did, but he didn't really get to experience it. He was too busy fighting and dying and, creating to really feel the emotion. And Treb said this life he needed to only experience emotion. He needed to experience emotion on such an intimate level that one life could give him the experience of what it takes most normal people to have 10 or 20 lifetimes. And he did just that. He came to Earth and he experiences emotion unlike any human could ever. The joy that he feels is so drastic. The anger he feels is so visceral and fiery, and the love he feels is just unbelievably giving. He can melt a whole room with his love. When he said that, it made sense. I was like, holy shit. Sorry, pardon me. Holy crap. He's right. And yeah, I think he was.
How did your relationship with your son change after learning that?
A lot. So, we have another child, and she also was born with some things, not anywhere to the level. So being a parent in general and believing that you create your own reality is a very hard thing. Because as a parent, you want to give your kid free will. You want to let them make their mistakes. You want to let them do whatever. But as a soul, you know that that no matter what you do, you can't really affect what their soul wants. They're going to find it one way or another. So it's really hard. It's like a rock and a hard place. You're like, I'm the most influential person in my child's life. Yeah, I can't really do. So what should I be doing to help them with their soul journey? So the thing I figured out is if we love them and we support them and we follow our instincts, we're going to help the best that we can, because both of them are nonverbal. Neither of them can talk yet at this point. So we're just off cues, like what do we think they want? Both of these souls trusted myself and my son's mom and my daughter's mom, Kalina, my wife now. These souls trusted our instinct enough and trusted us as beings enough where they said they're going to do the right thing for me. They're going to do whatever we need for them to have. And even if that's right or wrong, let's say I was a different person. I just lost my anger with them all the time and told them to shut up and, be good. And let's say that's who I was. Well, if they needed that in their life, they would have chose the dad who did that, right? Just like they're going to trust me to make the decisions I make. So follow your instinct, love and support them, be honest with them, and just do what you would want to be done for you with your kids. Protect them, obviously. Don't let them, hey, you want to put your hand on the fire, don't burn yourself, but you do need to know it's hot, right? You have to let them learn their lessons. But it's guided me a lot in how differently I've approached being a dad the second time around than the first. Let's put it that way.
Rob, I could keep talking to you, but due to time, I have to change gears. And first, I want to mention that you are going to be at the Sedona Ascension Retreat next March in 2024. Will you be speaking all 3 days or just on one day?
I'm going to be doing a lot of things there. I believe I'm going to be channeling by myself at least once while I'm there. I know that I'll be channeling with my dear old friends, Wendy Kennedy and Sean Swanson. As a group, we're going to do a panel. And then I'm going to be taking some people out and about for the walks that they have. There's these little walks that they do for 2 or 3 hours out in Sedona, and the energy vortex is out there. So I'm going to be doing at least one thing each day that I'm there. But it's a big conference. The last time I was there, I was doing a lot more, like 2 or 3 things a day, because I was only one of about 8 or 9 people there. But they've got like 20 presenters, a lot of really great people there now. So yeah, I'm going to be active, and when I'm not there, I'm going to be in the area hanging out with everyone at the event and stuff too. So
That's cool.
yeah.
Well, if people want to find out more about what you're up to or have questions for you, what's the best way to contact you?
The best way is through our website. We have an email list, and if you sign up for that, it pops up on its own about 10 seconds after you get there. Then you can be kept in the loop of all the things we're doing. It's etwhisper.com. And if you go to our YouTube, we have so much free videos up there. We have like 400 free videos, and we've kept them going from like 2013 up. We just keep them public so that people can enjoy, learn. That's probably the best place to see my channeling or to listen to my channeling. Um, and also my podcast is on there, where I talk to a lot of other channelers and spiritual teachers in our community. And any of the social media you're at, you'll be kept in the loop at some degree. If you prefer Facebook, I'm on Facebook a lot, my personal Facebook and the pages, and I'm getting on Instagram a lot more. So pretty much any of the major things. But if you go to the website, it kind of is our whole place where you can kind of find everything there. So
All right. Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
absolutely. The thing that I've really focused on in the last couple of years is trying to find the excitement for yourself that's going to help others get excited. You don't have to be an other person oriented person to want what's best for you. And usually what's best for you is what you're drawn to, what you're excited about, what you're being led to, your guides that might work with you. And just as a soul, it's generally a good practice to find something you like and do it and repeat doing that. So if that's the thing I leave people with, I would really hope that you just connect to those things that you're excited about, really excited about, and do whatever you can in your power to put more of your time and effort there. And if you really love something and stick with that, whatever it is, you're going to find growth in that part of your life. I've met so many people who said, man, I wish I could be a healer for a living. I wish I could do music. I wish I could channel. And following that advice, just putting all their extra time into this one thing that excites them, a lot of them were able to do that. Or they were able to do it enough to know that they didn't want to do it for a living because they just enjoyed it as a hobby more, So if you follow that path of excitement, it always takes you good places. So that's kind of my one thing.
Rob, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me here. And I'm sorry I talk a lot, so I'm sorry I took up a lot of talk time, but I really appreciate you having me here. And in the future, if you ever do repeats for guests, I'm always here. I'd love to come back and hang out.
Great. Well, we have a lot more to talk about. And I want to also mention that you didn't talk too much. So thanks again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.